Moscow, which is facing intense sanctions from the West, has now reached out to its old and trusted partner, New Delhi. Earlier today, Russia's Deputy Prime Minister spoke to the Indian Petroleum Minister, Hardeep Singh Puri. What did they discuss? Fuel and energy. Russia invited Indian firms to invest in its oil and gas sector. Many major Russian companies are currently involved in projects in India, including production, processing, distribution of oil and natural gas. Russia's oil and petroleum product exports to India have hit $1 billion. India has so far declined to condemn Moscow's invasion of Ukraine despite pressure from the West. Russian firms have encountered problems in securing financing for April contracts to sell crude and oil products. And facing economic isolation, Moscow is hopeful of getting cooperation from other countries. But analysts point out that any future investments in sanctions-hit Russia will not be without risks. India's ONGC Videsh has failed to get bids in its tender to sell 700,000 barrels of Russian so-called crude. Initially, 11 parties, including oil majors, had shown interest in buying the oil, but later backed out. ONGC Videsh, the overseas investment arm of India's top exporter ONGC, has a 20% stake in Russia's Sakhalin-1 project and sells its share of oil through tenders. The failure of the first tender by ONGC Videsh since the war in Ukraine started on the 24th of February shows Russia's economic support will not be without risks. The United States had banned imports of Russian oil and gas, while some Western oil companies, including Shell, have said that they will stop buying Russian oil. For more on these developments, with us on the broadcast is our principal diplomatic correspondent, Siddhant Sibul. Siddhant, tell us more about the conversation that took place earlier between the Russian Deputy Prime Minister and the Indian Minister.
Well, indeed, an important conversation. We know that Russia is one of the most sanctions country in the world since its invasion of Ukraine started. And now Russia is reaching out to India and China, two important countries with which it has good relationship, to essentially bail out amidst these sanctions. Now, the conversation largely was to make sure that the Indian Indian businesses continue to invest in Russia. And we know that earlier this month there was a briefing by the Russian envoy here in Delhi, in which he of course mentioned about the Indian investment needed in his country so that the economy does not break down. That is why the Russians are looking up to the Indians to invest more. But of course there are challenges. Investment in a sanctioned country is a difficult choice for any businesses, whether it's here in Delhi or in Beijing. And we also know that India has a mechanism, the ruble mechanism, that of course essentially can be a major backup plan for the investment purposes. Also, we know that during that conversation, something that was emphasized was on the nuclear cooperation. Now, the Russians are engaged in building reactors here in India and helping India generate more nuclear power. So India can essentially use this as an opportunity to negotiate with the Russians when it comes to energy, whether it's nuclear energy or whether it is when it comes to energy in terms of oil and gas.
We're leaving it there for the moment. Thanks very much for those inputs for now. WION now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the news on the move.